And that was when he noticed something else strange. The door was glowing. It was as if there was a neon strip built into the frame. As he walked through it, the light danced in his eyes, dazzling him. What on earth? He muttered to himself. He didn't stop walking until he got home. There weren't many people around as Kevin turned into the street where he lived. It was 3:30, and most of the mothers would be fetching their kids from school or in the kitchens preparing tea, the ones who weren't at work themselves, of course. Cranwell Grove was actually a crescent, a long, quiet road with Victorian terraced houses standing side by side all the way round. He had just reached the front door when he saw the man walking towards him. He wouldn't normally have taken any notice of anyone walking down Cranwell Grove, but there were two things about this man that struck him as odd. The first thing was that he was wearing a suit. The second thing was the speed at which he was walking, a fast, deliberate pace. He was heading for Kevin's house. There could be no doubt of it. The man was closer now, close enough for Kevin to see his face. He shivered. The face was round and expressionless, the mouth a single horizontal line, the eyes as lifeless as marbles. The man seemed to have had some sort of surgery, plastic surgery, that had left him with more plastic than skin. Even his hair could have been painted on. The man stopped. He was about 20 meters away. "What do you—" Kevin began. The man pulled out a gun. Kevin stared, more amazed than actually frightened. The man brought up the weapon and aimed it. Kevin yelled out and ducked. The man fired. The bullet slammed into the door, inches above his head, shattering the wood. Real bullets! First insane thought. This was a real gun with real bullets. His second thought was even more horrible. The man was aiming again. Somehow, when Kevin ducked, he managed to hold on to the key. It was above his head now, his fingers still clinging around it. Hardly knowing what he was doing, he turned the key in the lock and almost cried with relief as he left the door open behind him. He leant back and virtually tumbled in as the man fired a second shot, this one snapping into the wall and splitting fragments of sand and brickwood into his face. He landed with a thud on the hall carpet, twisted round, jerked the key out, and slammed the door. He heard the sound of feet moving outside. The man hadn't given up. He was getting closer. Desperately, Kevin looked round him. Was he alone in the house? "Mom!" he cried. "Dad!" No answer. He saw the telephone. Of course, he should have thought of it at once. There was a dangerous lunatic outside, and he wasted precious seconds when he should have been calling the police. He snatched up the receiver, but before he had even dialed the first 9, there was a volley of shots that seemed to explode all around him. He stared in horror. From his side, it looked as if the door was tearing itself apart, but he knew it was the man out on the pavement, shooting out the lock. Even as he watched, the door handle and lock shuddered and ricocheted on the carpet. The door swung open. Kevin did the only thing he could think of. With a shout, he snatched up the table on which the telephone had stood and swung it round in a great arc. And he was lucky. Just as the table reached the door, the man appeared. Stepping into the hall, the table smashed right into his face, and he fell backwards, crumbling in a heap. Better not to be around when he woke up. Kevin stepped over the body and went out, and stopped. A second man was walking towards him, and what was odd, what made it all so nightmarish, was that this man was identical to the first, and now the man was reaching into his jacket for the same heavy, silver-plated gun. Whimpering to himself, Kevin crossed the hall and walked up the stairs, stumbling as he tried to keep his eyes on the front door. He was aware of a sudden shadow, and then the man was there. stepping into the opening and firing at the same time. The bullet shot over Kevin's shoulder. Kevin screamed and jumped out of the window. He hadn't opened it first. Glass and wood exploded all around him, almost blinding him as he fell through the air and landed on all fours on the roof below. There was a lean-to next to the kitchen on the top of the garden, and there was where he was now. He had no time to enjoy the view. Even as he straightened up, he saw them, half a dozen more men with guns, all of them identical to the two he had already encountered. They were making their way through the gardens, hoisting themselves over the fences, marching across the lawns. Behind him, the man who had broken through the front door appeared at the shattered window and took aim. Kevin somersaulted forward and landed on his own back lawn. Kevin got to his feet and ran to the far end of the garden, hurled himself over the fence and tumbled, with a furious yell, into his neighbor's goldfish pond. It suddenly occurred to him that from the moment the nightmare had begun, nobody had said a word. There were at least 8 men in suits pursuing him, but none of them had spoken, and despite the sounds of gunfire on a quiet summer afternoon, none of the residents of Cranwell Grove had come to see what was happening. He had never felt more utterly alone. Dripping water, Kevin crossed his neighbor's garden and then vaulted over the wall into the next garden along. This one had a gate, and he pushed through it, emerging into a narrow alleyway that led back to the road. Limping now, he must have twisted his ankle in the fall from the window. He ran to the end, just in time to hop onto a bus that was pulling out of a stop. Gratefully, he sank into his seat. As the bus picked up speed, he looked back out of the window. That was when he heard the motorcycles. They roared out of nowhere. There were about 9 of them, huge machines, all glittering metalwork and fat black tyrants. The 9 riders had dressed in uniform, mauve leather, covering them from head to toe. Their heads were covered all by silver helmets with black glass, completely hiding their faces. "Oh, God," Kevin whispered. Nobody on the bus seemed to have noticed him, despite the fact that he was dirty, his clothes soaked, his hair in disarray, and his face covered in sweat. The other passengers were completely ignoring him. Even the bus conductor walked straight past him with a vacant smile. What was happening to him? What was going on? The first of the motorbikes drew level with the bus. The rider reached behind him and pulled a weapon out of a huge holster slung across his shoulder. Kevin gazed through the window, his mouth dropping. The rider had produced some sort of bazooka, a weapon at least 3 meters long and as thick as a tree trunk. Kevin whimpered. He reached up to pull the stop cord. The motorcyclist fired. The bus careered to the left, mounting the pavement, and crashed into the window of a supermarket. It smashed. Through breakfast cereals, dairy products, and bakery, slid into soft drinks and frozen vegetables, and finally came to a halt in dog food. The other passengers were still sitting in their seats, gazing out of the windows and looking only mildly surprised that the driver had decided to take a shortcut through a supermarket. Somehow he made it to Camden High Street, dodging up alleyways and crouching behind parked cars, desperately looking out for men in black suits and men on motorbikes. 3 yellow helicopters were buzzing overhead now, and somehow, just looking at them, he knew they were part of it too. He had 2 more narrow escapes. One of the bikers spotted him outside Waterstones and fired off a rocket that just missed him, completely destroying the bookshop and littering the high street with a blizzard of burning pages. He was almost killed a few seconds later by one of the helicopters firing an air-to-ground heat-seeking missile. But he was lucky. He had been standing next to an electricity showroom, and the missile was confused at the last moment by the electrical fires on display. By the time the clock struck 9, there was nothing left in the high street. Most of the shops had been reduced to piles of rubble. There wasn't much street left, just a series of huge holes. Kevin Graham was squatting in one of the bomb craters. He was lying underneath a mattress that had been blown out of a bed shop. He was grateful for it. It hid him from helicopters. He must have fallen asleep because the next thing he knew, it was light. The morning sun had risen and everything around him was silent. With a shiver, he heaved the mattress off him and stood up. He listened for a moment, then climbed out of the crater. It was true. The nightmare was over. The armies had spent the whole day trying to kill him had disappeared. He stretched his legs, feeling the warm sun on his back, and gazed round him at the smothering mess that had once been a prosperous North London suburb. Well, that didn't matter. To hell with Camden Town. He was alive. And he had finally worked out what he had to do. He had to make his way back into town and find the offices at Galactic Games. He had to tell Mr. Go that it had all been a mistake, and that he didn't want a career in computer games, that he wasn't interested in Smash Crash / 500, even if it was the most popular game in the universe. Kevin took a step forward and stopped. Overhead he heard a sound like thunder. For a moment it filled the air, a strange rolling, booming, followed by a pause, and then a metallic crash. A summer storm. At the far end of the battlefield, a man in a black suit appeared and began to walk towards him. Kevin felt his legs turn to jelly. His eyes watered, and a sob cracked in his throat. He knew that sound all right. He knew it all too well. The sound of an arcade, and someone somewhere had just put in another coin.